So now that I'm pretty happy with where we've gone with these stock plugins, here's a quick preview of what we ended up with, and then the rest of the video will be how we got there.
I can picture you in any color, even ones on crayons with names they couldn't choose. If every outfit gives a clue who's under.
Hey, this is Marcus, aka Cradle Cat. Today we're going to walk through how can we mix vocals, or what does that plugin chain look like in Logic Pro using only stock plugins. So I've gone through before my normal vocal chain and mixing process for vocals in a video that I'll link here where I use some third-party plugins. And now let's see if we can get a similar sound or do very similar things using only stock Logic Pro plugins, stuff that already comes with it. And I'll point out a couple other free third-party plugins that you could use too if you did want to go outside the stock ones, but we'll do it completely with stock as well. Before we jump in, again, if you want to see any other videos on me just walking through things I've learned about music production, see live stream songwriting where we make a song from scratch, or just keep up to date with my music, go ahead and subscribe for more content. And you can follow me on Instagram and Spotify as well to stay up to date with my music there. And with no more waiting, let's dive in and see how we can mix these vocals with just stock plugins and what those equivalents would have been in the third-party plugins. So over here, we'll first hear it just with my default kind of normal mixing chain, or my normal vocal chain here, where I am using some third-party plugins. I'll walk through what those are, and then we'll do another track with the stock plugins.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I think it has something to do with your shoes. Your heels are clicking down each path you're after, and every step you take makes the world move. So keep your eyes wide open now, on the floor without looking down. Keep your head up in those clouds, you're pulling me right up.
So that's what we're working with to start. And just to see what we're using, the very first thing in the vocal chain is this multiband dynamic EQ from Waves. And I use that to take out some of the lower mids whenever it gets a little too boomy there. Again, if you want to see more details on exactly why I'm doing all this, I walk into it in way more detail in that other video that I linked. But just as a quick summary of what that's doing, I'm taking down some of the boxiness and boominess, as well as some de-essing, which I might leave that a little higher if I were doing it again. I just have some light pitch correction, which really isn't doing anything because I already have this vocal well tuned. So did a lot of different takes and tuned it. So that's not really doing a ton. It's also already a stock Logic plugin. Just using a stock de-esser there. The enhanced EQ is a Kontakt plugin, I believe. So we'll walk through what an equivalent for that would be. Decapitator is a third-party plugin from Sound Toys. I love it. I use it all the time, but we'll show how you can get something similar with stock Logic as well. The 1176 and LA2A style compressors that I'm using in the series, we can do something similar with Logic Pro compressors. We have another de-esser for anything that comes up after compression, another EQ just to kind of tame anything after compression as well, and then just a gain plugin for some of the automation throughout. I'll walk through the sends afterwards as well for any of the third-party plugins we can change there. This is where the only ones that are have short reverb, long reverb, some delays, slap and ping pong, and a widening one. All of the delays and reverb are just stock Logic, so we don't really need to worry about those. The parallel widening one, I am using two third-party plugins, the Doubler and Ozone Imager, which I think are both free. So I'll put some links to those in the description just so you know where those are. But we'll walk through what some stock equivalents are for that effect that I'm using to get some extra width to the vocal. So we've got our new track here, and instead of using the third-party ones, let's go through and switch them out. So I have my first one. This is, we'll just turn them all off and go one by one.
a certain swagger.
So this is just taking out some of the boominess instead of...
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I think it has something to do.
So to switch this out, I'm going to pull that effect up on the other track so we can compare it and try to get the settings as close as possible so that it's comparable. So here's the third-party plugin. And then on my stock one, I'm going to switch this just to a normal EQ. I'm going to start with this because, there's not a dynamic EQ that I know of in stock Logic plugins. I could have maybe used a multipressor to do some dynamic compression in this range and none of the other ranges, but I feel like that'll be a little bit overkill. So we're just going to start with, dipping these down and see how it sounds from there. So around 245, 300 range, we'll dip some of these, and these are being dipped around 3.5. But they also go a little further sometimes when it's really picking something up. We've got the range of, so they're only dropped by almost, 1 decibel for the gain, and then they can go down that far. So let's get somewhere in that, 1 to 3 range just to get in the same ballpark. So around 375 and around 245. And then I do boost this a little bit. It's also, I'm going to leave that out though, just because I end up taking that away in the next step anyway. Great, so we're cutting that around 80. And boosting that.
A certain swagger. I think it has something.
Okay, we're boosting that high end just a little bit to get some brightness. Great. So now that we've got that in the same ballpark,
A certain swagger.
we'll just leave the pitch correction since that's already stock. Same with the de-esser. And now let's take a look at that enhanced EQ. So enhanced EQ, this is where it's kind of got a... I'm really using this to add a little bit of color when I'm boosting it around 8K for that extra presence in the vocal. I'm also, this is where I was saying I cut it out anyway. I also cut the 120 hertz range there, and I probably could just do that in the waves one. I did this mix a while back, so I'd probably just cut it back there. I don't know why I boosted and then cut it. So let's leave that up and compare it while we drop in something else. So instead of just the channel EQ here, I'm going to try using something that I'm hoping will add just a little bit of extra color to it, just something from the vintage tube EQ. So this is in my Logic stock plugins. We'll set this up so that it is around the 8,000 hertz range, and we're boosting that. What is that? 5.9 decibels, and I'll just put that right around the same. Assuming that's the same setting there, and then the boost 5.9. We'll leave this alone because we're not doing anything, and we already cut it in the previous step, so I'm not going to worry about the other ones. We'll leave this as silky here, and let's hear what that sounds like, and then compare it to the previous track so that we can adjust it in so that it sounds as similar as possible. So here it is.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I can see you've got a certain. I can see you've got a. I can see you've got a.
Yeah, so it's got a little bit more presence there, just coming in a little bit stronger from the very beginning. And now let's mute everything else up to that same point so we can compare these.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I can see you've got a certain swagger.
So pretty close there. Let's go ahead and take out the EQs and just compare those as well.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I can see you've got a certain swagger. I can see you've got a
So pretty similar up until this point. We'll plop on those EQs here, and you know, I've chosen the silky mode here just to get that. That's the kind of character that I want to impart on it when I'm using this additive EQ. So instead of just taking things down like we did earlier, I do want to add a little bit of color when I'm boosting these frequencies in the EQ. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead to the next step, which is the Decapitator. And this is one that I like to think can't be duplicated, but I had to do my research for this, and you know, I think there's a pretty good alternative. So instead of the Decapitator, so let's just hear that before and after on the third party.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I can see you've got a certain swagger.
So it just adds a little bit of grit, a little bit of, you know, fuzz behind the vocal there. We're mixing it around 30% for the dry wet knob. You can see we're cutting out some of the lows, really cutting out some of the highs. So that part that is distorted, the part that is wet has it's filtered down a little bit because that's the sound I'm going for in the mix. So to do something similar, instead of Decapitator, let's go to our stock track and choose our fat effects. So this is in multi-effects, fat effects. And here we have a few different saturation settings. And so Decapitator is an analog saturation emulator there, or plugin. And we're going to try to do something similar.
I can see you've got a certain swagger.
There we go. So that's a little bit closer.
I can see you've got a certain.
That was the Decapitator, and now fat effects.
I can see you've got a certain swagger.
So it's just got a little bit of that grit in the background.
I can see you've got a certain swagger. I can see you've got a certain. Great.
So we really toned that back a little bit, or to just a little bit of that fat effects coming through. It's way more than I expected to cut off there, to get it to actually match that 30% wet knob on Decapitator. So just kind of interesting to see how that played out, since I feel like we had the 100% wet really well dialed in. That might have to do with how it's doing the auto output level for how much makeup gain that it's using. But we got it figured out. So after that little unexpected detour on the final wet dry knob adjustment for the Decapitator lookalike from stock plugins, let's take a look at our compressors. So the first one is the 1176 style. So let's go ahead, and instead of that one, we'll go to our compression and just use the Studio FET, which I believe is another 1176 emulator, and we'll just dial these in to be, you know, really similar styles here. So just to, you know, see what that might look like, let's do our, you know, bright vocal, or see what that, oops, just to see the settings there. Okay, so it's using just the preset attack and release. We'll dial those in to try to get it similar as well. Let's hear what that is on the third party one, and then we'll compare it just to try to get that same effect. So here it is without it, and I'll toggle it on, and we'll switch the phrase so you don't have to keep hearing it.
I think think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think.
Okay, and then let's hear that on the stock plugin version.
I think it has something to do with.
It's got the same compression. Let's bring that threshold down so that it's pulling down, you know, similar decibel levels.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes.
And then we'll just get the output level to match here as well. Let's go ahead and hear the.
I think it has something to do. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your. I think it has something.
And I'm hearing more low end come through on our third-party plugin version. So I'm going to go back into that fat effects and just pull down some of the low bandpass there.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do.
So that was the third party, and again, here's the stock.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think.
Okay, so that's feeling a little more in the range there.
I think it has something to do with your. I think it has something to.
Yeah, so maybe we'll cut out a little bit more of that.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with.
There we go. So now we've got that, and when the reason I went back and changed that was because the compression brought up a little more of what we just couldn't hear as easily because it wasn't as loud in the fat effect stage. So now that we've got this dialed in, let's just.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
Check that attack.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has.
Then we'll compare that.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
And we'll bring that back down.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something. I think it has some.
And we'll drop that makeup gain just a little bit.
I think it has something to.
There we go. That feels pretty good. And then let's go ahead and move on to the LA2A style. So here it is on the third-party plugin where I'm using the something from the complete library.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
Okay, so instead of that, we're going to use another compressor, and this time we'll choose the kind of LA2A emulator style here. So we've got this set on compression mode. Let's try to get to a similar spot as far as how it's on peak reduction. We've got it 50%. So let's go ahead and tone that down a little bit and then try to get the same level of decibel reduction. So here we go.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
So that's the stock. And turn auto gain off here just so we can match that manually.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think.
Okay, so that's the, just looking at the decibels there to try to match those. And now let's hear.
I think it has something to do.
So that's the output level of third-party plugin. And then.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
Okay, so let's compare those.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with
I'm getting a
your...
little more grit on that. I'm hearing a little more grit on that third-party plugin version. Just listen for it again, and we'll probably add some distortion here
I think it has something to do.
versus the stock one right now.
I think it has something to do.
So let's try some soft distortion.
I think it has something to do with your... I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with... I think it has something to do with your... I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do... I think it has something...
Yeah, so that's sounding really close there. Let's go ahead and just, I'll compare levels there one more time.
I think it has something to do. I think it has something to do. I think it has some... I think it has something to...
And I think the... I realize I just said I think, and it's the same lyrics that we're just listening to over and over again. But let me try bringing down this attack here because it feels a little more consistent in the third-party plugin version right now. So again...
I think it has something to...
And then let's try to dial that in.
I think it has something... I think it has something to do. I think it has something to... I think it has something to do with your... I think it has something to do with... I think it has something to do with... I think it has something to do with your... I think it has something to do... I think it has something to do with your...
Yeah, I think it was in that first compressor that we needed to...
I think it has something to... I think it has something to do... I think it has something to do with your... I think it has something to...
There we go.
I think it has something
And then
to...
that second compressor.
I think it has something... I think it has...
Whoops. And now the stock ones.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something... I think it has something to do...
So that was the third-party one.
I think it has something to do...
And now the stock ones.
I think it has something to do with your...
Whoopsies.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your
There we go. That feels similar, similarly tamed now.
I think it has something... I think it has something to...
There we go. So now we've got the compression set up. Again, de-esser's the same, channel EQ is the same, and we've got our gain automation. So pretty much matched those up very well. Let's do a final comparison there.
I think it has something to do with...
And then the stock plugins.
I think it has something to do with your...
I'm getting more low end, so let's just let some more low end in.
I think it has something to do with your...
Maybe bring this up a little bit on the final EQ.
I think it has something to...
And then the third-party plugins.
I think it has something to...
Yeah, that feels a little better. Yeah, for some reason I was getting a little less low end coming through when I was hearing it. So just needed to adjust that a little bit on the EQ at the end. And then to cover that last item, again, everything else in the sends is stock, but the parallel widening is just using the vocal doubler from iZotope, which is just a doubling tool. It's free. I'll link to it. It just crashed Logic when I opened it, so I had to splice this video together. So I'm not going to click it again. And then we're using an imager right after that, which is just a stereo spreader to make it even wider. And we're just really tucking that in with some stock EQ in the background. So that's why you can pretty much just use almost any modulation effect because it's really just for that effect in that mid-range there to widen out the vocal. So instead of using the doubler, we're just going to use a chorusing effect, and we'll switch this to stereo. Make sure that my EQ stereo, there we go. And now modulation, chorus.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes.
So you can already tell it's not, you know, doing a ton there, but we'll just go ahead and throw a stereo spreader in it so it's even further, and then we'll bump it so it's really only affecting the range that's going through.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with...
So that's with it off. Here's with it on.
I think it has something...
And here it is boosted just so you can hear it.
I think it has something to do with your shoes.
Then we
I
just,
think it has some...
then we just tuck it in the background there.
I think it has something to do with your shoes. I think it has something to do with your shoes.
Awesome. And those are all the stock ones. So I just switched the doubler and stereo, the imager. Those, again, free plugins that I'll link to with a chorus modulation effect and a spreader to even spread it further. And then just tucked it away with EQ and pulling back that send. And now I'll play it on the, as we listen to the outro here, the video, just to compare them. I'll flip it on and off within context of the whole mix and kind of solo them. But that was what we wanted to do today, is try to achieve that same vocal mix with just stock plugins. Let's listen back to it. I may tweak it as we're listening, but if you like this video, want to see more stuff like this, or follow any of my music, go ahead and subscribe for more content. And again, if you want to hear more detail on like why I'm doing these things when I was doing the vocal mixing, I have that other video that you can check out where I walk through more why I set it up like this in the first place. So thanks for watching. Thanks for taking the time. Again, I'm Marcus, Cradle Cat, and I'll see you next time.
I can picture you in any color, even ones on crayons with names they couldn't choose. If every outfit gives a clue who's under, wear 'em all till I know every shade of you. So keep your eyes wide open now, on the floor without looking down. Keep your head up in those clouds, you're pulling me